Hello, my name is C. I'm from the Robotics Perception and Learning Lab of KTH in Sweden. In this video, I'm going to present our work, Adversarial Feature Training for Generalizable Robotic Visuomotor Control. Deep reinforcement learning has enabled training action selection policies end-to-end by learning a function which maps image pixel to action outputs. A suitable visuomotor policy should perform well not just for the task it has been trained for, but also for all varieties of the tasks, including novel targets, at different viewpoints surrounded by task-irrelevant objects. In this work, we demonstrate that by using adversarial training to learn a shared feature representation between training and testing domain, it is possible to train visual policies on simple tasks using RL frameworks, and then transfer the acquired policy to other novel task domains. There are two steps in our algorithm. In step 1, we train a policy in the simplest setup to learn to manipulate a template task object. In step 2, we exploit transfer learning to further train the policy to generalize to novel objects in realistic task setups. Let's go through the two steps one by one. In step 1, the sensor image will be first passed to a perception layer to extract features. Then, the extracted feature is sent to a policy layer to generate a low-dimensional latent encoding. And finally, the latent encoding is processed by a motor trajectory layer to generate a full trajectory. The motor trajectory layer is a generative model which maps a latent variable input to a trajectory of motor actions, which means the sequential decision-making problem is converted into a multi-arm bandit problem without temporal complexities. The policy layer is trained using reinforcement learning, which maps visual features to the given latent space of the motor trajectory layer. Since training the policy layer and the motor trajectory layer is not the main focus of this paper, we recommend you check out our earlier work for detailed explanation. After we train the policy, we have a perception layer and the policy layer that maps the input image of a simple task to a latent encoding which can be used to generate the trajectory to complete the task. In step 2, we will retrain the perception layer and the policy layer to be able to process images from the realistic task setups. But before moving to step 2, we first save the motor trajectory layer and also a bunch of input images in the simple task, together with the corresponding latent encodings as our source domain dataset. Let's quickly check what we have so far. We trained the policy in the simplest setup. We saved the motor trajectory layer and prepared our source domain dataset consist of input images and their latent encodings. Remember that using the motor trajectory layer, we can convert the latent encodings to a trajectory that solves the task. Now let's move to step 2. We have three types of images in step 2. The images contain template object, which are the images from our source domain. The images contain the task object and visual clutter, which are the images from our realistic task setup. And also images contain only visual clutter. All three types of images will go through the same perception network to extract features. Then the features will be sent to different networks for further processing. Let's have a look at those networks one by one. The feature from the template object is sent to the policy network to extract the latent encoding. The policy network is trained to minimize a mean-squared error between the estimated encoding and the true encoding from our source dataset, which is used to map the features to the correct trajectory encoding. The discriminator takes the features of both the template object and the task object to generate a binary label, telling if the input feature coming from the task object or template object. Similar to the discriminator, the classifier takes a feature of task object and visual clutter to generate a binary label, telling if the input feature coming from the task object or visual clutter. After we updated the three networks on the right side, we will update our perception network using the output of the three networks. The loss function we use to train the perception network is a combination of the losses from the three networks. The perception network should adjust its parameters to generate features that minimize the task loss of the template object, meaning that the feature should be sufficient to generate the correct trajectory. The perception network should also minimize the classification loss, which forces the network to generate features located on the task objects. Otherwise, the classifier will not be able to tell the difference between the task object and the visual clutter. Finally, the perception network should maximize the discriminator loss to fool the discriminator, so that we can generate the same feature from the task and template object. We train the perception network and other three networks iteratively until converged. Once everything is ready, we can link our final pipeline by first sending the task object image to the perception network to extract features, then to the policy network we just trained to generate latent encodings, and finally to the motor trajectory layer we trained in step 1 to get our trajectory that can solve the task. Let's take a quick look back at all the processes. In step 1, we train a policy using reinforcement learning in a simple environment. We save the motor trajectory layer, input image, and the corresponding latent encodings. In step 2, we retrain the perception network in an adversarial training paradigm, together with a discriminator and a classifier. We also retrain the policy layer using the data from step 1 to make the pipeline generalized to our realistic setup. Now let's look at some videos of our experiments. Our first task is a pouring task, where the robot needs to pour the content of a small cup into a desired cup placed on a table. We evaluated our algorithm on 3 different cups. For each target cup, we tested 10 times with different location and orientations. In this particular experiment, we achieved an amazing 100% success rate. The next experiment is a picking task, where the robot needs to pick up a cuboid object on a table. We evaluated our algorithm on 20 different objects, and 5 of them were not seen in the entire training process. Same to the pouring task, we tested 10 times on each object, and we achieved an average success rate of 86% on objects with training data, and 82% on unseen objects. That's all about our work. Thanks for watching. If you have any question, feel free to contact us.